Hello, I'm Congressman Jonathan L. Jackson, representative for Illinois' 1st Congressional District. Today I am honored to have a dear friend and colleague, His Excellency, Ambassador Moctezuma from the great country of Mexico. He was very kind and gracious to open his door to the freshman class for the 118th Congress. We've been able to establish a relationship. We started on a conversation some time ago at his residence, and I've asked him if he would join me in studio so we could invite everyone in to our conversation. So I'd like for you to be a part. Good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm really pleased to be here and very thankful for your invitation. And say hi to everybody.
So let me ask you, there are so many parallels of things that are happening in the United States, happening in Mexico. First, to familiarize the audience with yourself, you've had an incredible public service career. You've done public health, you've done public education. I first went to Mexico as a student. I was at a boarding school in Indiana in 1979, had quite a few Mexican classmates that came here to learn English, and they went back there, and they're doing great things in government and in private industry. But in your lifetime, you've seen a transformation of the Mexican economy. If you could tell us a little bit about your work in public health, how the standard of living has taken a rise, what's happened in public education, how you've built so many universities. Please share.
Well, I think that Mexico has done a very important job in many issues. Trade is one of them, and that's because of the relationship between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. You know, when we signed the free trade agreement, Mexico's exports were 80% oil, and now Mexico's exports are 80% manufacturing. So you can see there a big change in the quality of our workforce and our products. The important thing is that the same thing happened to the U.S. While Mexico grew a lot in its trade relation, the U.S. grew more than Mexico. So it's not a zero-sum equation. It's a win-win situation. Let's say in the agricultural sector, the Mexican agricultural sector grew 5 times. But the U.S. agricultural sector also grew 5 times. So who benefits from this? Mainly the consumer. About half of everything our viewers eat every day, fruits, vegetables, come from Mexico. They don't even know it, but Mexico is in their everyday life. And that's something that we're very proud of, to be part of our region, and this region is North America. And I also believe that in this geopolitical spectrum that we're living, where there is so much competition between Asia and the US and the rest of the world, the most competitive region is North America and can help the 3 countries to prevail in economic terms.
And so to give people an update, how many people are in Mexico?
In Mexico, we are 136 million people, more or less.
And continue to grow. And how many people are in the United States that have Mexican relations, Mexican ancestry? What would you say the relationship is, population, people to people, in the United States with Mexico?
That's a very good question, Congressman. I think that the population that has Mexican origin is nearly 40 million. It's about 38 million. So there is a very important influence culturally of Mexico into the U.S. In Mexico, we have about 2 million Americans living in Mexico, but there is about 30 million Americans that visit Mexico every year, and about 15 million Mexicans that visit the U.S. every year. So there is a very, very important interchange between peoples. In the border, about 1.5 million crossings happen every day from one country to the other one. Because if you live in the border, you want to get the best out of the two countries. So Americans go to the dentist in Mexico, and Mexicans come to the US to buy groceries, and so they make their life taking the best part of each part of both countries.
And so there's a large population of very smart Americans, to your point, that have used this as taking the advantage of a two-way relationship, that your hospitalization, your health care is quite substantial, that there are many people that move to Mexico from the United States for health care. And there's even now a healthcare industry, if you will, for people that get sick, that need long-term rehabilitative services, that are moving to Mexico. Could you say what's happened in your healthcare facilities in the last 20 years?
Well, you see, Mexico has a very strong health service and sector. We are very close to the US because we share a lot of information, a lot of products, a lot of the academy. Many people from Mexico come and study in the US, and many people from the US go and work in Mexico. But the thing that happens is that we are prepared to work together when we have problems like we had with the COVID pandemic. It was a very close relationship between the two countries, and we are very grateful to the US because the US helped a lot Mexico with vaccines when there was a lack of vaccines in the world. And we're growing a North American health effort to deal with any other pandemic that could arrive. But living in the border is something very important because there are specialties, let's say dentists, that you can find very good ones in Mexico, and so you prefer to go to Mexico for that treatment. Some other Mexicans will prefer to come to the US for another treatment like cancer. So this is something that complements both countries. And in the economy it's the same, Congressman. In the economy, we build together. It's not that Mexico sells to the US and buys from the US. It's that we're building together. And so let's say cars. If it wasn't because of the free trade agreement, cars in the US would be about 30% more expensive. And it's because we produce together that these cars are about 30% cheaper. So the benefit at the end of this relationship is for the consumer, for every American that wants to buy better goods and services.
So let's focus now on education, if you will. You've seen a transformation in the amount of universities. When we're looking at cybersecurity professionals now, we're having to call on Mexico to help furnish us with more cybersecurity professionals. How many universities would you say are in Mexico today?
Well, there are a university about 265 big universities, and we're growing. You know, if you take into account engineers in the world, Mexico is the fourth country that produces more engineers in the world. And that is helping a lot to create a North American supply chain of very specific issues that are very important, like semiconductors. You need people that are qualified to work in these semiconductor industries. And the United States is a leader in North America producing that. But the US needs more because of the problems of COVID, because of the problems of geopolitical issues. So the US needs to produce more semiconductors. And alone, it cannot be done. With the help of Mexican engineers, that is something that is absolutely feasible. So what we're doing is working together. We have an agreement, let's say, with Arizona State University in order to produce more engineers in the back end of the supply chain of semiconductors. And that is something that we're working together. If it wasn't because of this human capital that Mexico has, many of the manufacturing that the U.S. needs couldn't be done. So part of our relationship is not just investment, it's also a very important human capital development and workforce development.
And so you use the term interchangeably, human capital, human development, which I think is very key to understand for education. I prefer to use the term, if you will, human development. It takes 20 years to make a human being whole that has an appreciation of arts and culture and math and sciences, to make them a whole person, values and ethics. How is Mexico paying for education? Is education accessible at the college level for all Mexicans?
Well, first of all, let me agree with you about your view of education and human development. When everybody talks about STEAM, which is science, technology, mathematics, we always in Mexico put an A, which is arts. So one thing that I did when I was the Minister of Education, Public Education in Mexico, was to give a huge impulse to arts, to sports, and to emotional development. It's not only the mind of the people that has to be taking into account, but also its feelings, its background. And so this emotional development is very, very important. We introduced a new part of the program in the curricula, which is called healthy development. And this has to deal with nutrition, with sports, with emotions, and that's why I absolutely agree with your view. What we are doing now is giving free education from kindergarten, from preschooling, to university schooling. It's free for every Mexican that wants to be part of it.
So let me cut you off for one moment. Every citizen, every student in your country that wants to be an engineer or a doctor, they have access to college for free.
For free, yes, and that's in the Constitution. That's why we're developing more infrastructure, more teachers, and more universities in order to give to everybody the chance to study a degree. But right now, what is flourishing also is the technological spectrum. So there is a lot of people that want to become also technicians. So besides universities which are specialized in humanities, there is a big effort in universities that are also specialized in technology. But what we think is that humanities have to be taught not only in the careers which are familiar to humanities, but also in the technical careers.
And you all have done a marvelous job in a very short period of time. I've been absolutely amazed at how many universities, new campuses that have grown across the countryside, from the south to the north, from the east to the west. So I applaud you for that great work. Let me ask about the things that we have in common that many people would not assume. That number one, on immigration and migration issues, there's a lot of talk, as you can see, in the United States. Everybody thinks immigration and migration issue starts at the Mexican border. What they don't understand is that Mexico has to deal with immigrants and migration issues internally. Can you describe that for me?
Yes, of course. And thank you for asking that, because you know, Mexico is not a problem in the migration issue. Mexico is part of the solution, and we have to see it that way, because from everywhere in the world, there is people that want to come to the U.S. But before coming to the U.S., they go to Mexico. So every day we have people coming from the south of the continent, from Central and South America, to our southern border. And we have people coming by planes to our mainland. And all these people, we're talking about 9,000 maybe a day that go into Mexico, thinking that they will come to the U.S. But of course, most of them don't make it. And what do? They stay in Mexico. Or they want to go back home, but we have to pay for the return. So Mexico has a very strong asylum policy. Last year, we gave asylum to 147,000 people. And this is something that doesn't affect only the U.S., but also Mexico. And that is why the collaboration we're making between the U.S. and Mexico is very strong, and also has to deal with a regional approach to migration. So when we talk about the border, of the Mexican border, we have to talk also about the people that are moving from Brazil and Colombia and Panama up north to the U.S. That's where many people start their migration, not in the Mexican border. Just to tell you a number, we have about 36,000 migratory agents in Mexico dealing with this issue, while the U.S. has about 19,400 Border Patrol agents. So we have a lot of people engaged in this. And the policy of Mexico is to ask most of the migrants to wait in the south of Mexico in order to apply for their CBP-1 or to apply for coming to the U.S. Because we're concerned that if they go up north, there are security issues that we must avoid. So a lot of people stay in the south. And in the south of Mexico, people are very kind, very welcoming. And so many people say, why don't I stay in Mexico? And so we also have a very important policy of job permits to not just to stay, but also to work while they wait.
You know, I have seen the migrant issue. It's changed over the time, and there probably, let's separate the issue. There's a natural border flow, relationships of Americans and Mexicans crossing every day, and there's trade such as tourism. For example, how many Mexicans seek tourism visas to the United States?
Well, many Mexicans ask for a visa to come as a tourist to the U.S. There is about 12 million to 15 million people coming to the U.S. as tourists. We are a very, very important part of the tourist industry in the U.S. And of course, everybody needs a visa. And that is something that is always asked to the American consulates in Mexico.
Well, many people in my district that have family in Mexico that wants to come to the United States have found it very difficult to get the visa. What's the average wait time for tourism visas coming from Mexico to the United States?
Well, Congressman, and right now it's a long wait. Right now, if you ask for a visa, they might ask you to wait 10 months, maybe more.
For tourism?
Yes.
And let me ask you, for education, if you were accepted into an American university, how long would the visa wait be for a Mexican student to accept a scholarship that might have been extended to them in the United States?
Well, first of all, they are asked to have the application and the incorporation documents, and after that, maybe 3 to 4 months.
And let me ask you about the work visas for work that is advertised in the United States where they're seeking foreign nationals to come here and work. How long does that visa program take currently?
Well, that's something that is more dynamic because we have grown quite rapidly from about 180,000 working visas to about 400,000. And that is something that is much more organized because it's people that come to work to the US and go back home. The issue here is that people come to the US, I'm speaking about Mexicans, not searching for a job. They come because they have a job already. And so the demand side, what we call the pull factor of migration, it's here in the US. And the US needs this migration. It's not optional. And so if there is a legislation that passes and makes this possible, and so the people can come to the US and work and go back home, as they do with the transit working visas, that could be a huge improvement of the migratory problem.
And so Chicago is fortunate enough to have one of the major consulates in the world for Mexico. How many people do you service in the Chicago consulate, and how many people do you serve in the Los Angeles consulate?
Well, in the Chicago consulate, it's about 1,700,000, more or less. In Los Angeles, could be about 2.5 million. And consulates are very important because any Mexican, regardless of its migratory status, can go to the consulate and ask for protection if they need a lawyer, if they need a health issue. Consulates are very active in supporting the needs of Mexican migrants. And many times people from other countries, Central American countries, also use Mexican consulates when they have a problem. You know, when I came as an ambassador to the US, I told my president that I wouldn't want to be just the ambassador to Washington, but the ambassador to the US. And the US is a huge country. And so I've been traveling around because we have 53 consulates. And what I've seen is that people that work in the consulates are really, really nice people, professionals. They are very humane. They care for the people. I think they are very good public servants in the best kind of of the world.
Well, and I would credit that with the leadership, such as yourself, and the leadership of the Mexican government. It starts somewhere. And so that spirit has been passed on to people trying to facilitate, help those that need education, need employment. Let me ask you about another issue that we both have in common, guns and firearms. In the city of Chicago, at the beginning of this month in July of 2024, there were 109 people shot over the 4th of July weekend and 22 people killed. And as of yesterday, there was another officer killed. This is all in the district and all in the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago does not have a gun store, does not have a gun range. No African Americans manufacture any ammunition anywhere in the world. No Africans are manufacturing this. And guns are flooding into our neighborhoods. And so it's a leading cause of death amongst children in the United States. What's the parallel that's happening in Mexico?
Well, you see, with the problem of drug trafficking, you wouldn't have cartels which would be as strong as they are if they didn't have the weapons they have. they have very strong arms, and they buy them mostly in the U.S. And so we have a close relationship with the U.S. government in order to prevent this flow of arms from the U.S. To Mexico, because we find that about 80% of the arms that are used in criminal acts in Mexico come from the U.S. And that is something that we have to stop. The correlation between arms and drugs is there. So if we really want to lessen the flow of drugs from Mexico to the U.S., we also have to diminish the flow of arms and the power of these arms. That's why we say that the assault rifles and some very, very heavy ammunitions that are sold should be banned completely.
So you have a problem of U.S. guns entering into Mexico.
Yes, very strong.
And you know the manufacturer, and it's easier to locate the source from where these guns come from. And you have no ability to stop it?
Well, this is part of the conversation, the dialogue, the negotiation we have with the American government, with the states governors and local governors, because the problem is that in Mexico there is, in the whole country, one store that sells guns. And that store is run by the army only. And just in the border of the U.S. and Mexico, in the U.S. side, there are about 3,500 stores. So what we're doing is tracking the arms that the army gets in order to see where they came from, who sold them, and if this was a legal selling or not. But we have been advancing in this issue. This is the first time that the government of the U.S. recognizes that there is an issue between Mexico and the U.S. regarding these guns. And I think we're improving, but the effort has to be, of course, pushed harder in order to lower the smuggling of guns into Mexico.
You know, it's interesting. I think people miss it, that there is so much tension, if you will, on the news that says U.S.-Mexican border, U.S.-Mexican border. But the fact of the matter is, the United States government applauds you for your cooperation in fighting drugs. They applaud you and the way you've dealt with the migrant issue. And yet it's a misconception to how many things you have going right with the United States. Why is that?
Well, we're friends.
Yes.
We're neighbors. Mexican culture is present in the U.S. You know, when I was out of Mexico traveling, and I found some friends from the U.S., I asked them, what do you miss more from the U.S.? And they say Mexican food. In Mexico, we really enjoy a lot of the U.S. culture. And so it's very important for both peoples to do a life together. And I think that we're really sharing a lot. 33 million Americans traveling to Mexico every year, 12 to 15 million Mexicans coming here, students coming and going. We're producing together. We are the first partners of the U.S. We have a trade of $800 billion a year. We buy more from the U.S. than Germany, France, Italy, Spain together. So we are very close. But, you know, electoral politics, they pick an issue and try to exploit that issue. And that is something that we hope it will pass after November, and we can talk more about the things that unite us, which is a lot, than the things that separate us. But one thing for sure, Mr. Congressman, is that the future of Mexico is with the U.S. and the future of the U.S. is with Mexico. because we have to be together as a region, North American region, together also with Canada, if we want to prevail in this world that has grown with a regional approach in some other parts of the world.
So just one last question about the guns and the armament. Many people in the cartel are very heavily armed with military-grade weaponry. Was that equipment purchased in the United States?
Yes, everything we find is made known to the U.S. and we are permanently asking to strengthen the vigilance in order to stop that flow.
You know, that was such a striking number for you to say there's one gun shop in the country of Mexico, and it sells to the Army exclusively.
No, the Army is the one who owns it.
And the Army owns the gun shop.
Yeah.
So if you will, it's not even a gun shop, it's the military installation. And they manufacture, it's their armament. And how would Americans feel if we had one gun shop in our country and 3,500 gun dealers on the border selling into us? Those numbers are absolutely staggering. So let me ask you, when the toll of gun violence in Mexico is staggering, the violence that's being inflicted by these cartels is a menace to our country as well as a menace to your society. Is that fair to say?
Yes, of course, it is fair to say. And I believe that if we work together, if we make an effort to see this holistically as a complete problem, which is not only bilateral, it's also global. That's why we're part of a coalition that it's global to fight against crime in the world. If we fight together, I think that these problems could be solved and not just finger pointing each other. Because sometimes you listen to somebody, some politicians that say, why don't we invade Mexico in order to stop the flow of drugs to the US? That is not really reasonable. That is not a solution. And just to listen to that is scary because those are ideas that shouldn't be raised.
So let's talk about bilateral trade and the agreements. The free trade agreement is coming up for review. What are you looking for in the renewal of the free trade agreement?
Well, I think that the agreement has been evolving as the economy has evolved. You know, in NAFTA, there was not this huge digital economy, and as you mentioned earlier, the cybersecurity needs. In USMCA, there is an effort to make the trade more even for workers. So the labor part of the trade is very important. And this is something new that we think is very, very important. Another issue that it's new, it's regarding, I wouldn't say climate change, but all the effort to keep nature without the problems that it's facing in the environment. So in this review, we have to see how things have evolved. There is a part of the agreement that deals with disputes. When you have such a trade as we have with the US and Canada, there are many disputes, of course. And there are mechanisms in order to canalize those disputes. I think that also has to be under review. But the review of the year 26, it must be seen as something to make it better, to promote a better trade agreement, and to make it more to the benefit of the peoples. That's why the labor part also has to be fortified.
So on the sustainability of the environmental movement that's now going on, and I've moved away from calling it climate change. I know where that came from. It's global warming. That when you look at what's happening in Arizona and Phoenix, from Tucson to Phoenix to Texas and on into California, and as we speak right now, there are 300,000 acres on fire in the United States. This temperature is unsustainable. What's happening in the northern Mexico is really making a desert out of a place that was once green. What's the future of sustainability and moving towards greener energy in Mexico?
Well, we have something that is very positive, which is that the next president, we elected a woman president, the first woman elected in North America as a president. She's a scientist. She studied physics and she's an expert also in biology. And so she is very aware of everything related with global warming. That's why I'm very, very confident that Mexican policies will be much more tougher in order to prevent the increase of all these causes of the global warming. I believe that we are acting as a humanity very slow in this regard, that we have to really develop consciousness about the need to make big changes in the short term. We are feeling everything related with the change in the climate. As you mentioned, droughts, fires, hurricanes. You know, Acapulco, a beautiful city, there was a storm, a tropical storm in the morning, and just in hours grew into a 5 category hurricane and destroyed the city. And nobody was aware that this heat was going to be.
When did this happen?
This happened 8 months ago.
Wow.
And Acapulco was destroyed, really. If you go right now, you will still see many buildings that everything inside disappeared. It was just a structure. And this kind of destruction is part of this change in the climate. We're having conversations regarding the Rio Grande water supply from Mexico to the U.S. and the Rio Colorado water supply from the U.S. to Mexico, because both rivers are drying. And if you go to many places in Mexico that were very mild, right now they are warm. And so everybody is noticing the change in the climate. But we're not changing our culture, the way we live with the environment. And I think we need much more radical measures in order to stop the global warming.
And I also want to say congratulations to your outgoing president for the magnificent work that he's done. And it was a great election, and my heart was thrilled to see Her Excellency President Sheinbaum on the stage. I followed her speeches, and it seems like that was, people said it couldn't be done. So people were behind the times. Mexico was leading the way, if you will, in this hemisphere, having catapulted, if you would, it wasn't a macho image that the men and the women of Mexico rightfully decided this was who was best qualified to lead them at this point and into the future. And I think that's given people in our country a warm embrace, and it put a smile on so many people's faces. Please extend my heartfelt greetings to Her Excellency. What can you tell us about the upcoming presidency and the work that she has in store?
Well, she will start her government next October the 1st. And she has picked a very interesting, well-experienced cabinet, So everybody is very, very satisfied with her picks. I believe that she's going to be a fact and science-based decision maker, and many, many things regarding the environment and regarding labor and regarding social change will happen. There is an impulse in Mexico towards making society much more even. In this government, 5 million people came out of poverty, which it's a very, very important data. Also, the south of Mexico, which is the poorest part of Mexico, grew twice as much as the northern part, which is the richest part. So regionally, we also are trying to deal with making a more even country. And the salary, the wages of workers more than doubled. So that's why Claudia Sheinbaum was elected with 60% of the vote. And when so many people vote for one option, it means that they are satisfied with what's going on, and that a country can be socially with a very positive attitude. And I think Mexico has this important power, which is that people are confident in their country, that people are thinking about the future in a positive way, and she will find a group of Mexicans willing to stand with her to work together for a better future of Mexico and of North America, because we believe in Mexico that our future is with North America.
You know, one of the things that I'm so excited about, I've really appreciated our friendship, and I look forward to working with you many years into the future, is there's a sea change, there's a new generation that's coming on, and you can feel their fervor, their energy, what's happening in Mexico from all of the universities that have been built. Mexico has been very deliberate in their economic development. The people, many Mexicans that live here go back home to see their families vacation, get medical, and come back. So to your point, it's not a one-sided, it's a reciprocal trade relationship. Even when I was a child some years ago, it always bothered me to hear the term about a third world nation. A lesser developed country is what the capital markets had called these countries. And there's no third world nation. There is no lesser developed country. People are evolving and developing at different rates, considering the history that they've had to confront to bring democracy, if you will, back to the people. And so you all have done a tremendous job. And when I look at the life expectancy, the income, the education that has come in Mexico, I wanted people in my community and people that would be watching this to understand that it's an offensive term, that I found it offensive, to call Mexico our backdoor neighbor. So what does that mean? Canada's our front door neighbor? No, it's they are both borders. They're both respectable people, and we have to look at if you will, Mexico as being the front door to the Americas. We're only one piece of the Americas, if you will, less than a third of the population in the entire hemisphere. But some people just don't understand that, Your Excellency.
You know, sometimes I joke that Mexico and the U.S. are not neighbors, that we are roommates.
I love it.
Yeah, because we share the same things, and we must share the same future and build it together.
And like we can say that there were Native Americans here before this country became an independent nation. There were, if you will, the indigenous people from South and Central America that were living here, that this land wasn't founded as a barren piece of land. There were people here. So in many ways, when we see the population of Mexican ancestry here, Mexicans didn't change, the borders changed, and we put it over on top of Mexico. And I want to thank you again for the time you've given me. I look forward to speaking with you again. And I want to say
I'll be pleased.
congratulations for all the great work you've done in America and extending yourself to make these relationships amongst the 118th Congress and before my tenure.
Thank you very much, Congressman, and thank you to all the people that are watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.